Augustin, warm welcome to Startup Grind. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Jens. Great to see you again. We've been talking for a while.
As a start for our audience, could you give a brief introduction about yourself?
Well, I grew up in New York. Parents are from Hong Kong. Came here in '08. But previous to that, I was living in the Bay Area. So I've worked in enterprise software and in startups for many years. I was a regional architect, actually. I flew around and helped customers, and I was more of a back-end developer. It was a blended role. It was more like architecture, back-end development, and also customer facing. But with 8-bit Oracle, I sort of had to learn how to do front-end development. And that's how AI came into the picture, because I had to teach myself because I didn't know anything about front-end development. And so that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I mean, I've been working on this for since early 2024, but we'll just let the conversation go in because I think that's enough of an intro for me.
Thank you. Now, so normally when we do these fireside chats, we don't share screens because it's a chat. But in this case, I think it's very important people also to see what you have built so that we can then follow the discussion on that. So can you give us a sort of a quick walkthrough of the 8-bit Oracle?
So I wanted to show this just to give a little tip to the other startup people who might be building things. I didn't actually have this sort of branding site in the beginning. I built this branding site later because the actual site that people see, I found that people were scared of. They might have thought maybe it's some kind of hack. And the other lesson that I've learned is that not having a mobile application makes it a bit harder in terms of distribution. You know, when people type in a URL nowadays, it's not like early internet where a lot of the sites were safe, or there wasn't as much unsafe sites, but now there's more unsafe sites, or at least there's more awareness of that. And so when people typed in a URL that starts with a number and they go to a site that looks like this, I noticed that unless they knew me or they found me through some direct means, it was very hard to sort of maintain that connection or for them to ask questions. So that's why I sort of came up with this site, which sort of tries to give an introduction to sort of my view of the I Ching. So the I Ching is an ancient divination system. And there's a saying on the site, which is from Lao Tzu, which to me beautifully explains how the I Ching is related to the yin and yang, and of course the unity or the Tai Chi. So he says the Tao gives birth to one gives birth to two, which is yin and yang. And then yin and yang gives birth to three, which is the trigrams or the bakwa in Cantonese. But when you stack two trigrams together, that's the hexagrams. That's the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. And so that's what this app is all about. It's basically ChatGPT, but with I Ching, you can say. And it's based on Yarrow-stock divination. So I simulate the actual splitting process of piles. And people ask, what is that? And so it looks like this. There's various ways to sort of generate hexagrams used from the I Ching. It's historically it was a manual process. You can do either something called coin toss, which is a much more simple process, or there's something called Yarrow-stock, which is a more involved process. But basically, the same process is repeated 6 times for each of the lines in the hexagram. And each of the lines can be either a yin line, which is a broken line, or a yang line, which is a solid line. And there's also changing lines. So there's actually 4 possibilities per step, because each line can be changing, and there's yin and yang. And so that's pretty much...
You told me sort of the history when you got introduced to this and what inspired you to do this.
So my dad was always into the I Ching. In 2023, he passed away, and I started going through photos and trying to remember what he liked to do. And I don't know, when I get older, when you get older, when we get older, maybe we start getting more curious about how our parents lived, what their lives were like before they had kids. And so it's sort of part of my exploration of maybe what that was like for him as he was learning the I Ching. I'm trying to go on my journey, which is sort of trying to maybe go on some kind of parallel, similar path. Now, of course, Asian parent, he never really talked about the I Ching. I just noticed that he would always be looking at it and reading it. And he wasn't a very social person, so he never had a sifu, an actual master. And I feel like for these systems, now I'm a tech guy, but I'm actually getting more into of more woo-woo stuff too. I do find that for systems like this, it is useful to have some person, a master, someone with lineage or with some talent to guide you. And so for the goal with 8-bit Oracle, for me, it's about spreading awareness and spreading knowledge so that people can be more knowledgeable if they pursue an actual and trying to find an actual fortune teller, right? The goal of this is not to say, hey, this can replace, professionals or people with lineage. It's more for exploration and learning.
Yeah, and by building the app, you are learning a lot about
Exactly.
the process. So cool. Now we've seen what the app looks like, and so maybe if we switch over
Yes.
yeah. And for everybody who wants to know, so Augustin is using OBS to be able to share this screen as a camera. Now, as you said, you had got inspiration from your dad, and you kind of got that spark of interest. Now, at Startup Grind, we talk with a lot of people at different sparks of interest. So from your perspective, what is a good spark like to follow?
I think for me in this journey, that spark of interest is probably the most important thing, right? Like that's the thing that keeps you motivated. And for me, this discussion is presumably about coding with AI, but I think the maybe mindset is maybe the most important thing to learn about just this whole grinding process, right? Like there's a lot of ups and downs. I don't know, it was very fortuitous for me. It took me a while to arrive at this. I mean, I was, of course, sad for a while. I had another app idea which was much more difficult to execute on that I sort of switched away from, which was more about like photo albums on steroids and family trees, but I just didn't have the ability to execute on that. I'm not a front-end dev, and the AI tools were much more primitive back then. So I've been using Cursor since it first came out. And so it's sort of funny, like as I've been building this thing, the tools have gotten more powerful. And so it's been quite an evolution in sort of my workflow as I've been building it.
Yeah, and it's funny how we use the words back then, and it's kind of 2023.
Yeah,
that was back then.
that's right.
Yeah, but yeah, today's conversation is about, as you said, building, coding, and your vision. So if we imagine this, because now we've seen what the product looks like. I mean, if you would today, July 2025, start again, like what would be your first step to get somewhere based on what's available today, and kind of which tools or platform would you probably use to build with?
I think it's a much more challenging exercise to find the tools now than when I started. So when I started, there wasn't a lot of different tools. They were just basically Cursor. And the way I treated it, I mean, I actually used a lot of just normal chat to teach myself. I wanted to learn about front-end development. I knew that was a gap. So I basically wanted to learn the background, because when I first started doing front-end development, there's a lot of package management and bundlers. There's all these like layers of technology. Coming from the technical world, I realized there was a lot of layers of tech that I was completely unfamiliar with. And so one of the first things I asked AI was just to give me a landscape or a history of front-end development. I wanted to know, and so then I came to know that actually it's because of Facebook. So Facebook in around 2008, they open sourced React. And then they improved a lot of the front-end tooling and bundling and packaging, because it's not just raw Notepad HTML anymore. Now you have very many different systems interacting with each other to give you the look and feel of what you see on websites today. I think that's a necessary step. I don't think I would change sort of that kind of learning journey that you need to do. For people who are getting up to speed now, I guess if you're non-technical, what I would say is try to break down the landscape of tools and try to categorize that. Try to have categories at least. And that way you're not just trying to learn, the 99th tool, and then it just try to say, hey, this is actually a no-code tool like N8N and Make. These are no-code tools, and they are different from tools like Cursor and Windsurf, which are more development, like classic development environments that people like I would use. that happen to have AI chat in there integrated, and try to have some perspective on that. So like if you're not a developer, you might want to steer towards no code tools because that's what they were built. They're designed for people like yourself who are non-technical. Who are non-technical, right? For coders, it's easier because you have more of a base level of knowledge that you can use to sort of build on top of and climb out of this whole, AI kind of morass of many different tools. I guess that's how I would do it. Today I would try to organize things, but I have a technical background, so I would be able to say, oh, these are workflow automation tools that have been around for many years. They've just updated their marketing because now the boxes in those tools can now call out to AI, right? So now they're agent automation. So this is the other thing, right? Like, this whole agent or agent automation thing is a lot of buzzwords, but you need to sort of get down below the buzzwords to actually know, okay, what are they actually doing? Because agents actually have a lot of old meanings from some sort of the Python-based libraries like LangChain, right? Like that has a very specific meaning in that world. But if you go into the no-code world, an agent is sort of like, it's actually a workflow that has a sequence that does something. And that's also executes differently. It has different ways of customization and it's a world that I'm not very familiar with. I know it exists, but I deal mostly with the code, with the, SDK coding world in terms of agents. Yeah.
Now, and there are new functionalities coming like MCP that makes agents talk to other agents. But then it's always the question, like, going back to what are you building and do you actually need it, or are you more like I am? I'm very curious about all of these different tools. And as you said, when you started back in the days, which is like 3 years ago. So how do you pick the tools that you use, and what do you look for when you evaluate if to learn a tool or to invest your time in a tool?
I guess it depends on what the goals are. For me, my goal was I wanted to build something with the I Ching to help me learn the I Ching. And I started off with a very static site. And for that, I actually didn't need a lot. I did need some AI assistance, but I didn't need a lot because I had a bit of a technical background already. Even the state of cursor of where it was at back then, it was good enough for me to get going. And quite honestly, there wasn't a lot of alternatives. But my intuition is that if I happened to pick cursor first, I don't think I would have gone shopping around, because I would have felt like, actually, this workflow is actually much quicker than if I were to ordinarily do it without any tools, right? And I feel like a lot of times now, the bottleneck is not the AI, it's sort of my code review, right? So I do know people that they do let agents, like an MCP agent, they let them run overnight and they let them build and execute a specific, like a very long set of tasks to execute something. I'm not comfortable. I guess I'm a bit of a traditionalist, even though I use AI. I'm a bit wary of those. I guess it goes back to sort of my science fiction. When I read science fiction back in the day, like there's a saying, I think it's from Heinlein or Asimov, like Tanstaffel. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Right. So, my suspicion is that if you have an agent work 8 hours for you and build this big code base, you jump ahead real quick. But if there's any issues, you are going to be stuck. Or you're going to be heavily reliant on an AI to try to find the problem, and there is no certainty there that it will be able to find it. That's my experience anyway. Yeah. I've experienced where the AI, I leaned on the AI a bit heavily to execute and develop some feature, but then it was just some bug where I just had to take out all that code and just redo it. Now, I have noticed in the past couple of weeks, you see how fast this industry moves, the context from that Cursor is managing is much better than previous months. And I believe that's because it's encountering competition from tools like Claude MCP or Claude Code, more specifically. The competitive landscape is such that the tools, they're sort of like leapfrogging each other. And even if they're not leapfrogging each other, there is an imperative to always improve the tools themselves. And I think you messaged me in WhatsApp about, it's not vibe coding, it's sort of managing, or it's context coding or context engineering, right? Like, yeah. I feel like that's how you tell, or that's how you would differentiate what like a good tool and a great tool is how it manages that context. But since the tools are all black boxes to us, it's all based on vibes again. It's like, oh, is the specific situation that I ran into that I needed to execute on, did it actually feel good, or was it good enough for me, and so on. So it's still hard to measure because they intentionally keep that hidden from you. You can't see all the traces, all the reasoning that the tools do. You can't see how it's searching through the code base to build the context, to send to the LLM, to give the answers back into the development area. They hide all that from you, quite intentionally.
Yeah. And I think one great point before we kind of go into, as you said, if you let it run overnight, I mean, some bills can run very high. And I think in the last, now it's July 2025, I think there was a bit of a back and forth in regards to pricing structures for some of these tools. And they, of course, they need to make monies to become tools. So we understand that. I do not use how to recharge on these accounts. I just make sure that I have a limit and then I know where it's going. But when it comes to choosing a tool like Cursor, I mean, not to get stuck down the line by maybe either a company being acquired, which could be a good thing, but what do you do to, for example. So what do you do? How do you evaluate to think about tool and code, not to get stuck if something disappears?
So what I do, I mean, I use GitHub first of all. So all the code is stored in a repo, but I will have in my workflow, I'll also have Claude on the side because I feel like it's a great brainstorming chat interface. So periodically I'll ping that for ideas and I'll create markdowns out of them. So, and any kind of markdowns of some findings, I'll also store in the repo under a docs folder. There's another thing that Cursor does. I'm sorry, I'm shilling Cursor. That's really what I know. They have something called rules, which are just markdown files that sort of constrain or guide the behavior of the code agent. And so if I get past a particularly difficult problem that the AI struggled with, I'll tell it to say, hey, why don't you create a rule summarizing, our findings and the good and bad examples of how to overcome this problem. So, React has a lot of things with state and good ways to manage, state machines and so on. So there's all these like details that you will go through. And I guess maybe that's more important than the actual tool, is sort of like keeping your thinking hat on while you're using these tools. And the AI does, I think of it like this, like the AI does the typing for you, but you really need to do the thinking. Now, of course, the AI do thinking too, but that's sort of how I want to have my relationship with the AI. I don't want to sort of lobotomize myself and just let the AI go and do things. I review things. If there's a tricky area that I'm having it do, I will be more careful. I will be more measured, and I will intentionally slow it down. I will not have it just try to one-shot the whole thing. I will have in my mind either a design or a set of functions that I know need to be implemented, or I'll brainstorm and say, hey, what are the functions? I'll review it, and I'll say, hey, why don't you just go through these one by one? But it is quite scary how quickly these tools are improving, because what I'm noticing now is on its own, after it generates code, it will create a test. And then it will execute the test against the code. Now, it still doesn't, it knows it, and it knows I do not prompt it. So Cursor in their case, but I'm sure, I feel like all of these companies, they observe each other. So I don't want to think of it as a Cursor specific idea, but I imagine all of the tools, they will eventually get to the point where they will write their own tests at the end before they will say, hey, this code is ready for you, or I am finished with this specific task that you had me do.
Yeah, and writing, I think Cloud Code also does test, but it's test-driven development or being able to automate things. But I think it's a great point you said. When it's solved a hard problem, you ask it to document it.
Yes.
So that you can, if needed, redo it.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, so for 8-bit Oracle, for example, I have a bunch of rules around sort of best practices around React and Tailwind. These are just front-end libraries, and even some best practices around Postgres, which is the SQL database in the back. Oh, I actually use Supabase. But now, if I build another product, I have these rules that I can carry along with me. So even if Cursor shuts down, right, like to your point, I still have my GitHub repo. I have my learnings that I've sort of documented as I've been working with the AI, and it's sort of like a documenting of the whole development journey in a way. Yeah.
And these are the things I think the learnings, it's very easy to run very fast ahead. But we also talked about, so when you and I we had chats, we talked a little bit about the market, because even though the spark was to learn, and now you're also going to the market. So you said to me
Yes.
something like, why shipping something is better than perfect.
Oh, just shipping something is better than having perfection. Yeah, there's the go-to market. Now, I haven't figured it out. I'm going to be very honest with the audience. I have not figured out marketing distribution, but I have learned some things. So one of the things that I learned, I shared, was to have some kind of, and a lot of SaaS applications, they do that. They split off the side from the intro site. I didn't do that. I jumped straight into the app, and then I realized, well, I can't skip steps. There's the no free lunch again. Don't skip steps. Go back. There's a reason why that's done. You might think it's boring and not useful, but I had to do it at the end, right? And the other thing that I've realized, and one of the things that you asked me if there was something I would do different, is I might have gone into mobile development earlier, because I'm going to be working on a mobile version. And the reason for that is it's actually hard for people to find new sites on their own. Like Google, SEO is such a competitive thing. It's its own discipline. I looked into it a little bit, but I quickly realized the SEO landscape is changing so quickly, and there's actually so much there. I'm just going to have AI develop an 80% SEO metadata for my site, and then I'll just leave it alone. And then I realized that actually there's a reason why the app stores take 30%. And the reason for that is the app store is actually a much better user experience for mobile apps, right? Like, they can just go into a safe environment. Users are not afraid. You're not going to get worried about getting all your stuff, your computer or your phone, getting malware. And it's just much more easy to discover things. If I tell someone, hey, look for my site, 8-Bit Oracle, on Google versus on the App Store. The App Store is a much more constrained environment, right? Now, there's probably a reason why I didn't go into mobile development first. It's much more difficult. But lucky for me, the AI tooling has improved to the point where I can get by as doing mobile development. So I'm starting to build a mobile version. And the other thing that I've learned is also sort of, what a user sees in the site is part of the productization and the packaging. The other part of it is sort of the frame of mind that you put the user in. And I realized I did not actually go through with the user in terms of a journey. I just give you a question box, and you're on your own in terms of what you want to ask. And there was no journey about learning the I Ching. Now, I have pages. I do have backgrounds pages that I go through the history, but of course, people don't go to that, or some do, but a large majority, they'll see the text box, and they'll probably go away, right? I'm just being honest. And so what I realized is I needed to have more passive ways of learning the I Ching. Not everyone is up to the task of, pouring their heart out to some app that they're not familiar with. Right. And they're probably not familiar with the I Ching either. Right. So I need to sort of have more of an onboarding journey where I can then build up to the point where people are comfortable asking questions of the I Ching.
Yeah. And you told me also that when it comes to maybe the users that you are actually, who are your clients, they might be mobile first people, for example, in Hong Kong. So
Yes.
They don't have a laptop at home, or they don't use it that way. They are very much mobile first.
On the train,
Oh yeah, or you told me at the restaurant, somebody.
Or waiting for the lift to come down. Yeah, that's sort of the dead times. Like, that's another topic. Maybe we need to be bored a little bit more, Jens. Yeah, totally. Much more convenient experiences, the mobile experience. Now, the site is responsive, so it does. Tailwind has a lot of shortcuts or ways to adjust the styling and the composition of the individual widgets in the screen to adjust for mobile. So that's there, but it still stands like it's also a tougher. I have not monetized yet, but it's also tougher for people to even pay on a site versus mobile, because in mobile, all the payment is already sort of part of your Apple user or your Google user. On a site, I would do. I'm doing integration to Stripe and Revenue Cat, but that requires keying in a credit card and so on. So there's more friction around the payment experience on a site as well. Now, the advantage of the site, though, is I'm able to do things like, hey, scan this QR code and and you can actually start doing things very quickly without a download. So that was very useful when I was able to do some live demonstrations at the convention center and some other demos that I gave at some conferences. So that was a very good user experience, just because you're not downloading a 200 megabyte application. Actually, it wouldn't have even been able to get off the ground if quite honestly, no one would do that with that kind of time constraint. So there's some advantages and disadvantages. Yeah.
Yeah, and advantage also when the feedback that you can get from your customers, because they can try it while you're standing next to them rather than download and all that. So you covered a really good amount of points in regards to sort of the monetization, as you mentioned, Stripe, and yes, they take a lot of money, the app stores, but they provide value as well. We talked about the spark and also motivated. So from your perspective, what should a solo entrepreneur do to stay motivated?
That's one of the things that I'm trying to teach my daughter too, right? Like, I feel that that's one of the most important things. As men, like middle-aged men, like imagine I was living by myself and I had no hobbies. I mean, we go into deep spirals. Or I would go into a deep spiral, right? So I feel like having some interest is so key. One of the things actually I mentioned in one of my LinkedIn comments was escaping the algorithm, actually. So we can go into this. This might be a good thing. And so right now, one of the things, and you probably observed this too, is like our online experiences are very curated. Like, you go to, what do you watch? You don't actually watch, you don't channel surf anymore. You go to Netflix. Netflix actually shows you everything, right? And when you go on the web, of course, it's Google and you're searching, or now you're using something like Perplexity. And I feel like, I was in London recently just on vacation, and I just wandered into a bookstore, and it was a bookstore called Watkins Books. It's the oldest occult bookstore in London since the 1800s. And I just asked the guy, hey, where's the I Ching section? And the bookseller happened to be very knowledgeable. I went to the I Ching section. It was a bunch of books that I'd already seen or not too interested in. But then I started wandering the bookstore. So I'm not outside of the algorithm now. It's just Watkins Books, however they organize their books, that's what I'm seeing. And then I went to the Aleister Crowley section, and I saw something about memory palaces. What is this memory palace? This is not a word. YouTube did not feed me this. It's something that just sparked my interest, and I picked it up. And then the bookseller said, hey, you know what? You really shouldn't read this Memory Palace book, because it's sort of like a condensed Cliff Notes, and it's very advanced. You should go to the basics, and so then he introduced me to another book by Francis Yates called The Art of Memory. And so this gave me another avenue to explore on how to better educate people about the I Ching, the concept of memory palaces. This is another topic. People in the audience, you can Google memory palace, and then there's a deep rabbit hole. But I think it was just so important to just maybe wander a bit. And that's why I guess maybe bookstores are so important. And if you have the privilege of going to a different country, just exploring maybe what their books are like or what their people are like, just escaping somehow.
Yeah, or visit your local library and get some inspiration. Yes,
I love that. Yeah.
One of the questions, so what do you do when you hit a wall in regards to your development? Do you go out take a walk, or do you go do something else? What do you do to shake out the problem?
Walking now is a bit tough though in Hong Kong. I'll tell you. Well, there's heat waves in Europe too. But I do like walks. I also like, just listening to music. I don't really have any great tidbits for this here. A lot of times, especially with AI, you can do so much in such a short period of time, but sometimes you just need your brain to wander. Maybe you're not really stuck. Maybe your brain is subconsciously telling you, you know what, you've done enough. Why don't you just wander a bit, let your mind meander a bit, and then carry on. But actually, AIs are actually great at getting out of, if you're needing some kind of inspiration, you can just say, give me some inspiration. And actually, my app, you can actually say, give me some inspiration, and it will use the hexagrams of the I Ching to guide and give nuance to the reply. So, AIs are really great at that. And that's actually what I like AIs for, is it's not thinking for you. You're using it to help you think more, And so that's why when I'm working with AI, I get a lot more tired, because your mental load when you're working with it is much higher, because you're processing much more information. And I'm much slower than the AI. So I have to okay, hold on. I think of the AI sort of like a dog on a leash, right? It has a very urgent desire to help you and always give you more information. It's always wanting to help you, but sometimes that can be too much. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pulling us along, and but at the same time, yes, you say getting stuck. Then ask Augustin. It's been very interesting to hear about your story, the spark, and your advice in regards to how to get started. What does the future look like for 8-bit Oracle? And you also have Digital Rain Technologies, which is your other companies. What's coming ahead?
So 8-bit Oracle, and you can tell from the styling, it's a bit more of a world. And so I'm exploring ways to maybe add on a simple text game where people can use to explore the I Ching in not such a directed manner, but maybe more of an immersive manner. And I'm actually also working on more of a mobile app that's more mainstream and more of an easier onboarding process. So I have some more minimalist designs that are not as matrix oriented. So 8-bit Oracle was more of like, I was just inspired by, it was a bit of a nostalgia for me to build this thing, to style this thing, because it reminds me of when I was younger, just starting to play computers, and it was very much tied to when the whole family was younger and my dad was around and so on. And so I styled it that way. And then the matrix theming was more about, and the I Ching is actually a lot about exploring our world and trying to understand our reality. And so that's why it looks the way it looks. But maybe a more mainstream app would have different styling and would be more about, easing people into the experience. So one of the ideas I had was more of a daily hexagram experience that might be tied to some masterpiece of art. And that way you can more easily remember the hexagram because you're associating with some striking image. And then it would be maybe a little educational in terms of art history as well. So that would be one of the ideas, to make it more packaged or more easily for people to use. Yeah.
Yeah, looking forward to that. I mean,
and I actually am doing some freelancing too. So Digital Rain Technologies, it's just me, okay. But I'm doing some freelancing work and I'm building sort of a content engine for this quantum startup. So they want to generate or develop some content around Quantum Day, which is the day when a quantum computer can break standard encryption. And so it will be sort of content generation, long and short form content, automated, but with a feedback loop. So it will sort of self-improve. I'm trying to use a library. This might be a little bit too deep in the weeds, but I'm trying to use a library called DSPY, DSPY for the technical folks. And there is some built-in feedback to self-improve prompts. So usually prompt engineering is a very manual process. I've done it, so I know what it's like. Like you look at it, you maybe have AI help you improve the prompt, and then you try to do it. But DSP has some kind of a way to incorporate metrics and automatically incorporate feedback and metrics to improve the prompt. But I realized that feedback was sort of like assuming you had some form, some shape or form, not just a block, which is what I have now. Like I just have a block of marble, really, of just a very rough idea of this topic, but not actually a tone of voice. So you actually need to have a little bit more before something like a DSPY could kick in. But yeah, so I'm doing some contracting work there just to sustain myself and give my app some room to breathe, so to speak.
Yeah, quantum computing, of course, is another one of those areas that are being rapidly developed and when it happens. So one question that we normally ask towards the end of the interview is like, how do you stay updated on AI? But let's rephrase it and say, how do you stay updated on AI and other technical matters such as quantum computers? Like, who do you follow and where do you follow them?
So for quantum stuff, I actually have the two guys that I'm working with, young guys. One of the guys' name is Chris Tam, very smart founder, splits time between Taiwan and Canada. He has a Twitter account. I can share it with you. But he's very up on the whole quantum stuff. And for AI, I'm in a lot of these different AI WhatsApp groups in Hong Kong. And so it's a very informal thing. I almost feel like we're bombarded with so much AI, like what's new with AI content. I instinctively just try not to look at it too much. It's a little bit too much for me, but I do use Twitter. So there's no one that I would typically say, hey, you should follow this guy. But I typically do follow individual projects that I like and enjoy. Or so, for example, I am following the DSPY OSS project. That's the open source library that does prompt optimization. And there was a guy who was part of the DeepSeek team, and I sort of like his content. Tior Taxes on Twitter. So, but mostly I just use Twitter to keep up with AI and quantum stuff.
And to connect with you, LinkedIn, best way.
Yeah, LinkedIn, Augustin Chan, or I have a site, augustinchan.dev, but you can also find me on LinkedIn. Just connect with me. I'll connect with you back. And my username is AUChan, AUCHAN on LinkedIn.
And we'll link to that below the video. And also, Augustin, it's been great to have you here at Startup Grind. I learned a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. It was great. And thanks for the opportunity. Thanks to Paul as well for making the connection. And yeah, great to be here.
Yeah. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to bring Marin in, who has the questions from the audience. I'm just